Now we're going to put in our last item. We're going to use this composition that we created before as a layer in our final build composition. So I'm going to close this, and you see these icons. Every type of file has a different icon in After Effects. This is an image icon because this is just a JPEG. This colorful icon that has sprockets on the two sides, almost like a film strip, is a composition. So I'm going to click on Spring Resolve, the composition that we made previously, and bring it in as a layer. We want it at the end. Resolve is usually what happens at the end, so it ends at 9:29. Instead of it jumping in like this, let's make it fade in. Let's make it wipe up. So we're going to make our final resolve with the letters of spring following the branch wipe up. So this is good practice. I'm going to select the layer spring resolve. To keep the style going, let's make this last layer wipe up. I'm going to go back to my rectangle tool with a spring resolve layer selected. When I create a vector shape, it makes a mask. So a mask controls the area that is visible or opaque, and everything else outside the mask is transparent. A mask can be a regular shape. You see we have these shapes available to us, these pre-made shapes, just like Illustrator and InDesign, or we can make shapes using the pen tool so that these shapes, if you have the layer selected, when you're creating them, can function as masks. So I'm going to change to my selection tool, select the top left, hold down my shift key, select the top right. Before I do that, I'm going to make a keyframe. So I make a keyframe with the mask in this shape and position, and then I go forward 1 second. I can say +100, enter. I'm going to make sure I have my top left, top right, holding down the shift key to select more than one point, and then I hold down the shift key again to constrain to one axis. This is my second keyframe, so now my mask moves from the first keyframe to the second keyframe, and it looks like a wipe, and it seems like the timing is good. You see how my white flowers, my mid-shot layer, pops out? Let me fade it out. So I'm going to select the mid-shot branches layer and hit T for opacity and activate the stopwatch so the opacity is 100% here. And it's good practice to line up the keyframes. Just like in InDesign, it's good practice to line up your boxes and containers with your guides. When you're finessing the keyframes, you can move them around, but it's very helpful to have them aligned between layers, to align your keyframes between layers as much as possible. To make a keyframe that is my branches layer exactly in the same frame as my spring resolve layer, I can use the keyframe navigation arrow and click, and it jumps forward to the next keyframe, and then I know that when I change this variable, these keyframes are aligned. The keyframe navigator is very useful because it jumps from keyframe to keyframe. I know that I'm on a keyframe, and then I'm changing a keyframe, not creating a new one inadvertently. What's left? Well, we know that we want the B to go up, make a circle, and land on the S. Let me give myself some guideposts. When the S lands, I'm going to close and deselect my layers because I would like to make a marker on the composition itself when I would like the B to land on the S. When the S arrives, if I want, I can pull out my preview, and that way I can toggle back and forth. When my S arrives, I would like my B to arrive maybe 2 frames later. I'm going to go forward 2 frames using the step forward button on my preview menu. So I'm going to, with all my layers deselected, when I make a marker, it'll be a marker right on my composition like this. So now I know when my B should arrive, and now I'm going to make a marker where my B should arrive. Because the footage is always moving, and I'm going to say view show rulers. I already see my rulers, so just to show you how and where to turn them on, I'm going to click on my ruler. You see I get this double-sided arrow on my cursor, and I'm going to mark where I want my B to land. I'm going to pull out another guide from the ruler above, the horizontal ruler, which is here, and this way I know when my B should arrive. Here, my marker on my timeline, and here these guides show me where. Now I can plan my B journey. I'm going to move it, click on the layer, and move it so it's the top layer, because I want my B to be on top. It is a bit tricky with all these position keyframes, so let's open them up. I can also use the timeline zoom bar, which is this top skinny bar up here. Let's see. As the mid shot wipes across, I think that's when my B should hitch a ride. So I'm going to delete all the keyframes after when my B and the mid shot intersect when the mask is opening up. It's about 2:04 on my timeline. It could be slightly different on yours. That's fine. To animate my B, I'm going to need to change the position, which would be P. The rotation, if I hold down the Shift key and I hit R, then I see both of them at the same time. And maybe scale. I'm going to also hit S. So I'm going to use position, scale, and rotation keyframes to get my B across here. I'm going to activate scale. Because it didn't have a previous keyframe, I had to activate it on this with the stopwatch by clicking here. And rotation, I'm creating a keyframe by clicking here in the navigator. I can also just change the value, and changing the value will automatically make a new keyframe. So I'm going to do frame by frame animation. I'm going to adjust my timeline zoom bar so that I see the length of time that I need to go. So it's about, let me give a rough estimate here, about 5 seconds. That's a long journey for a bee. Let's try it, and if it's too long, we can adjust it later, but it'll be good to have a lot of detail in the motion. So I activated all my keyframes here, position, scale, and rotation. I just moved my timeline forward a little bit, and I can zoom in by saying Command plus. If you hold down the space bar, you can pull your stage around. So you can hold down space bar and drag with your mouse around. I'm just going to move my B and rotate. So this will take a little bit. I think I would like it to change scale so it looks like it's lifting off. I'm going to make it a little larger to have a lift off, and then it stays large. You can also copy a keyframe by selecting it or dragging over it, and then when you say paste, Command V, it will paste wherever your timeline marker is. I'm going to have a lift off, and then I'm going to have it go back down a little bit as it goes into flight. So the scale, it goes up, and then it'll go back down gradually, a little more gradually. Is that I move my timeline marker, I move the B, which automatically creates another position keyframe, and then I change my rotation. So timeline marker, drag the B, rotation. You can make your own rhythm, and if you have any special knowledge of beam motion, or if you would like to check out beam motion or anything, you're welcome to do a check on how bees actually fly. That would be fun. So once in a while, I'm going to change scale so it looks like perhaps it's going further away or closer. All right, I am cutting a bit so you don't have to watch my whole keyframing process. Let's see what it looks like. It's a little errant here, but could be bee-like. We can fix the path later. That's an important thing to say. When you're fixing a path, actually it's very, very important that you're on a keyframe. To make sure you're on a keyframe, you want to see this keyframe navigator highlighted. See, when you're not on a keyframe, they're blank like this. When you're on a keyframe, they're highlighted. Like, I can go back and fix my path later. For the bee to ride the branch, ride the S, and then fly away. This is a chance for us to review one more time our track motion skills. So for the B to move with the S, I'm going to track the motion of the branch, this dark spot. So I'm going to select Spring Resolve and say track motion. So I'm going to move my track point and put it over a dark spot that I know will persist. So one of the things about tracking motion is the choice of the spot can influence the success of the track. So sometimes that's a trial and error process to find the right spot to track. So let me edit the target just to make sure. So I want to track motion, and let me analyze forward here. I got my cascade of keyframes. Now I'm going to transfer that motion to the bee. I want the motion to be transferred to the bee when it lands. So that's another good use of my composition marker. Select my bee layer. My motion source is going to be Spring Resolve. Remember, this is our composition that we created earlier, so we can actually track a composition because now we're using it as a layer. I'm going to edit the target. The target is the bee. Okay, I have a few options this time, and it's going to be the bee. Say OK, and then apply. Both dimensions, x and y. Oh, my bee jumped a little bit. Let's see. And it's moving with the branch. It's on the bottom of the S instead of the top. If I want to change that, if I want to adjust that a little bit, remember we have to select all the keyframes. Last time we clicked on the word position, but there are all these previous keyframes that I don't want to shift, so I'm just going to drag over the keyframes I want to shift. Make sure you select all of them, and then I can use arrows on my keyboard to nudge. I'm moving all my keyframes together. Just moving one won't help because it'll just look like a glitch, quick jump. But if I move them all together, then they will move together. See if that works. Yeah, now my bee is more or less riding on this right place. I'm going to rotate the bee a little bit as if he's trying to decide what to do. It separates. I can hold down the space bar to adjust a little bit. At one point, I would like the bee to lift off and fly away. It's at 820 in my case. Again, yours would be slightly different. So I'm going to delete all the frames, all the position keyframes that I don't need after 820. And if I want to, I can zoom in so you can see all these keyframes were generated from our Spring Resolve and then transferred to the bee. I can move him slightly. I'm going to go back, make a scale keyframe here, and then I'm going to do the same thing to make it look like it's lifting off. I'm going to make the scale just slightly larger and point the bee in the direction it's going to go. I'm going to zoom out slightly, Command minus, and then I have to zoom in so I know that I'm grabbing the bee and not a position point. So I'm going to put scale and rotation and rotate the bee so he changes direction and then goes off. Let's see, all those keyframes I can adjust. Move my timeline marker to the beginning. There's a lot to be fixed here, but let's just get an overview of what it looks like. Let's see.